All right, we are going to try this again. I'm going to read this chapter again. It's a long one, so I'm probably going to do 2 parts. So this is part 1, and then I'll do part 2, and you'll just have to watch 2 videos. I do want to warn you that this is a very, there's a big event that happens in this chapter, and sometimes it's hard to hear, but it is important to the story. So if you don't remember, I just read about Billy kind of making a bet with 2 boys that lived in the bottoms with him. Their names were Rainey and Reuben, and we get kind of the idea that they're not the nicest boys ever, but we also know that they haven't grown up in like the nicest home or in the best way. So it actually isn't Billy who makes a bet, it's actually Grandpa. And so that will come into play later on in the story. So I'm going to read. The last thing that I read was, the last thing we read was that Reuben and Rainey and Billy are trying to find this raccoon. They call it the ghost coon. And they find it, and supposedly the dogs have treed the coon. And so they're all running towards it and trying to get the coon out of the tree. Coming up to the tree, I could see it was a huge bur oak. It wasn't tall, it was just the opposite, rather low and squatty. The top was a thick mass of large limbs, and it hadn't shed all of its leaves yet. It stood by itself in an old field. There were no other trees within 50 yards of it. About 15 feet to the left were the remains of a barbed wire fence, and an old gate hung by one rusty hinge from a large corner post. I could tell that at one time a house had stood close by. Reuben saw me looking around. A long time ago some Indians lived here and farmed these fields, he said. I walked around the tree looking for the coon, but could see very little in the dark shadows. Ain't no use to look, Reuben said. He won't be there. Rainey spoke up. This ain't the first time we've been to this tree, he said. Reuben told Rainey to be quiet. You talk too much, he said. In a whining voice, Rainey said, Reuben, you know the coon ain't in that tree. Make him pay off and let's go home. I'm getting tired. I told Reuben I was going to climb the tree. Go ahead, he said. It won't do you any good. The tree was easy to climb. I looked all over it, on each limb and in every dark place. I looked for a hollow. The ghost coon wasn't there. I climbed back down, scolded old Dan to stop his loud bawling, and looked for little Ann. I saw her far up the old fence row, sniffing and running here and there. I knew the ghost coon had pulled a real trick, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Little Ann had never yet barked tree. I knew if the coon was in the tree, she wouldn't still be searching for a trail. Old Dan started working again. My dogs covered the field. They circled and circled. They ran up and down the barbed wire fence on both sides. I knew the coon hadn't walked the barbed wire. Ghost or no ghost, he couldn't do that. I walked over the old gate and looked around. I sat down and stared up into the tree. Little Ann came to me. Old Dan, giving up his search, came back to the tree and bawled a couple of times. I scolded him again. Reuben came over, leering at me. He said, You give up? I didn't answer. Little Ann once again started searching for the lost trail. Old Dan went to help her. Rainey said, I told you that you couldn't tree the ghost coon. Why don't you pay off so we can go home? I told him I hadn't given up. My dogs were still hunting. When they gave up, I would too. Reuben said, Well, we're not going to stay here all night. Looking back to the tree, I thought perhaps I had overlooked something. I told Reuben I was going to climb it again. He laughed. Go ahead, won't do you any good. You climbed it once, ain't you satisfied? No, I'm not satisfied, I said. I just don't believe in ghost coons. Reuben said, I don't believe in ghosts either, but facts are facts. To tell you the truth, I've climbed that tree a dozen times, and there just ain't no place in it for a coon to hide. Rainey spoke up. Our old blue hound has treed the ghost coon in this tree more times than one. Maybe you two don't believe in ghosts, but I do. Why don't you pay off so we can get away from here? I'll climb it one more time, I said. If I can't find him, I'll pay off. There's that determined spirit that Billy has. Climbing up again, I searched and searched. When I got through, I knew the ghost coon wasn't in that tree. When I came down, I saw my dogs had given up. That took the last resistance out of me. I knew if they couldn't find the ghost coon, I couldn't either. Digging the two $1 bills out of my pocket, I walked over to Reuben. Lillian was by my side. I handed my money over, saying, "Well, you won, fair and square." With a grin on his face, Reuben took my money. He said, "I bet this will break your old grandpa's heart." I didn't reply. Reaching down, I caught Lillian's head in my hands. Looking into her warm, friendly eyes, I said, "It's all right, little girl. We haven't given up yet. We'll come back. We may never catch the ghost coon, but we'll run him until he leaves the country." She licked my hands and whined. A small breeze began to stir. Glancing up into the tree, I saw some leaves shaking. I said to Reuben, "Looks like the wind is coming in. It may blow up a storm. We better be heading home." Just as I turned, I saw little Anne throw up her head and whine. Her body grew stiff and taut. I watched her. She was testing the wind. I knew she had scented something in the breeze. Stiff-legged, head high in the air, she started walking toward the tree. Almost there, she turned back and stopped. I knew she had caught the scent, but could only catch it when a breeze came. Looking at Reuben, I said, "I haven't lost that $2 yet." Another breeze drifted out of the river bottoms. Lillian caught the scent again. Slowly she walked straight to the large gate post, reared up on it with her front feet, and bawled the most beautiful tree bark I had ever heard in my life. Old Dan, not understanding why little Anne was bawling, stood and looked. He walked over to the post, reared up on it, and sniffed. Then, raising his head, he shook the dead leaves in the bur oak tree with his deep voice. I looked at Rainey. Laughing, I said, "There's your ghost coon. Now what do you think of my dogs?" For once, he made no reply. Going over to the post, I saw it with a large black locust put there many years ago to hang the gate. Looking up at the tree, I saw how the ghost coon had pulled his trick. One large, long limb ran out and hung directly over the gate. It was a drop of a good 12 feet from the branch to the top of the gate post, but I knew we weren't after an ordinary coon. This was the ghost coon. I said to Reuben, "Boost me up and I'll see if the post is hollow." After breaking off a long Jimson weed to use as a prod, I got up on Reuben's shoulder and he raised me up. The post was hollow. Not knowing how far down the hole went, I started the switch down. About halfway it felt something soft. I gave it a hard jab. I heard him coming. He boiled out right in my face. I let go of everything. Hitting the ground, I rolled over on my back and looked up. For a split second, the ghost coon stayed on top of the post, and then he jumped. My dogs were on him the instant he hit the ground. The fight was on. I knew the coon didn't have a chance, as he wasn't in the waters of the river. He didn't give up easily, even though he was on dry land. He was fighting for his life, and a good account he gave. He fought his way to freedom, and he made it back to the bur oak tree. He was a good 6 feet up the side when old Dan, leaping high in the air, caught him and pulled him back down. At the foot of the tree, the fight went on. Again, the ghost coon fought his way free. This time he made it and disappeared in the dark shadows of the tree. Old Dan was furious. Never before had I seen a coon get away from him. I told Reuben I would climb up and run him out. As I started climbing, I saw little Anne go to one side and old Dan to the other. My dogs would never stay together when they had treed a coon, so that any way he left a tree, he was met by one of them. About halfway up, far out on a limb, I found the ghost coon. As I started toward him, my dog stopped bawling. I heard something I had heard many times. The sound was like the cry of a small baby. It was the cry of a ringtail coon when he knows it is the end of the trail. I never liked to hear this cry, but it was all in the game, the hunter and the hunted. As I sat there on the limb looking at the old fellow, he cried again. Something came over me. I didn't want to kill him. I hollered down and told Reuben I didn't want to kill the ghost coon. He hollered back, "Are you crazy?" I told him I wasn't crazy, I just didn't want to kill him. I climbed down. Reuben was mad. He said, "What's the matter with you?" "Nothing," I told him. "I just don't have the heart to kill the coon." I told him there were plenty more. Why kill him? He had lived here a long time, and more than one hunter had listened to the voices of his hounds bawling on his trail. Rainey said, "He's chicken liver, that's what it is." I didn't like that, but not wanting to argue, I didn't say anything. Reuben said, "I'll go up and run him out." "I won't let my dogs kill him," I said. Reuben glared at me. "I'm going up and run that coon out," he said. "If you stop your dogs, I'm going to beat you." "Do it anyway, Reuben," Rainey said. "I've got a good mind to," said Reuben. Just as Reuben started to climb the tree, old Dan growled. He was staring into the darkness. Something was coming. "What's that?" I asked. "I don't know," Reuben said. "Don't sound like anything I ever heard." "It's ghosts," Rainey said. "Let's get away from here." An animal was coming out of the darkness. It was walking slowly in an odd way, as if it were walking sideways. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight out. I'm going to stop there, but don't worry, part 2 will be, below this video. So make sure that you read the second part to this chapter.